Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be taking our first look at a weekly meta breakdown for the historic best of one format with Phyrexia, All That Will Be One. All that is one, something about one. But we're going to be taking a look, as always, at the top performing decks on the Arena ladder for each of the formats each week. And we're hopefully getting enough data to start seeing some new cards trickle in. Now, something important to note with these Arena Eternal formats, whether it be Explorer or Explorer, the card pools tend to be larger. And for those of you who haven't played much in terms of extended formats, usually there's fewer cards that make a general impact. It's not very likely that you have brand new decks all spurred on. Now, sometimes that does happen, but a lot of times you'll see cards added here or there. But it does take a little bit longer than something like the standard format. So we are going to jump into it and look at the top performing decks of the week. As always, we get the data from Untapped GG. What you see on the screen, companion tool, runs alongside your Arena client, tracks your win rates, loss rates, deck collections, in-game overlays, whole bunch of sweet functionality. A bunch of it is free. Link is in the video description down below if you want to sign up today. Helps out the channel. In addition, I'll paste all these deck lists, as always, into the video so you can copy and paste them and net deck your heart away. Quick programming note, we've been mentioning this on a couple videos, but trying to hit 10,000 subs by June. We are in the mid 7,000, so if you haven't done subscribe to the channel, it's free, helps out the channel. And like I said, we cover every single format as much as the data is available, special events on Arena, we do deck lists, everything like that, as well as sweet gameplay in Mythic rank as well. So February 11th through the 18th, Platinum to Mythic rank, 31,000 games of best of one. The top performing deck, once again, as is every couple weeks, is Izzet Wizards, 66% win rate. And there's kind of two versions going around. This version with Piece It Together is one that's been on the fringes. We usually see the pretty stock list, but this one's slightly different. We see Piece It Together, 1 mana, and it has starting intensity 1. So you draw a card, so it's basically like an opt style effect, consider. And then you add another intensity to it, basically for each time it was cast. And then if the card itself has intensity 4, you get to take an extra turn. So normally you'd have 4 of these in the deck. If you draw all 4, you get to take an extra turn for 1 mana. However, in this particular case, with the Izzet Wizard deck, you can recast things from your graveyard thanks to Dreadhorde Arcanist. As such, you basically have 8 copies, so you can basically get to a point where you take a whole bunch of extra turns, which is kind of cool. The core of the deck is a spells-based deck, and you're using effects like Symmetry Sage's buff to give extra power, along with Balmor to give extra power boost, so your Dreadhorde Arcanist can flash back a whole bunch of stuff from your graveyard. And then you also have Reckless Charge, which just outputs a whole bunch of damage and haste out of nowhere to kind of hit your opponent. Notably, this version is opting to not play with Fire, which is a common card that we see in play. So a little less interaction, a little bit more card advantage in this particular one. So you're going to have a worse matchup against something like Elves. While Elves is still a good matchup because you can go over the top, being able to pick off a Lord or stuff is quite impactful. Your removal spells will be Static Discharge and Wizard's Lightning. This version is also opting to play Bone Crusher Giant as a 2-of. So the benefit of Bone Crusher Giant is you could get around Sarah's Paragon lock, 9 lives lock. However, you can't flash back the Stomp from the graveyard. So kind of edge cases, you're better in some matchups, you're worse in others. I still think I would probably play a spell-based card here. You can also probably fix up this mana base to have at least 1 creature land probably in here, just to get some utility out of that. I usually like Wizards at about 20 lands. You really want to get to 3 mana. Beyond that, it's fine, but hitting 3 is kind of that sweet spot with the deck. Next up is 5-color Reanimator Dragonstorm, but this is really a Jeskai combo deck. So the core of this deck, what you're trying to do is put cards into your graveyard. Ideally, the card you want in your graveyard is Emergent Ultimatum or Dragonstorm, but preferably Emergent Ultimatum. And then what you do is you cast Mizzix Mastery targeting. So if you just cast Mizzix Mastery targeting Dragonstorm, you get 2 storm counters. So you need 1 more spell in order to get the full kind of combo going. If you do Emergent Ultimatum, it is effectively 3 spells, and you could kind of win the game that way there. And what you're trying to do with this is basically get a Terror of the Peaks out, and then 2 copies of Bladewing the Risen. Because these are legendary, Bladewing would see the legendary rule come into play. It would sacrifice a copy. Copy goes into the graveyard, but the trigger is on the stack of returning a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a dragon. So you return the Bladewing, and it creates an infinite loop of dragons entering the battlefield and dying, which allows you with a Tear of the Peaks to machine gun your opponent to death. You'll also see Moriat of the Frost. This is a shapeshifter, which counts as every creature type. So it could become a copy of either Tear of the Peaks, or this is except a copy of permanent you control, except it's legendary and snow. So it can copy either your, like, basically be copy 4 or copy 3 as needed, kind of going from there. You are able to put stuff into your graveyard with Faithless Looting, Otherworldly Gaze, Faithful Mending, Prismari Command. Solve the Equation helps you find whatever combo piece you're missing, and you kind of just go to town like that. Pact of Negation for protection. That's a 62%. Someone asked me about this week. I have some gameplay video on this. Pretty much all these decks I have gameplay video up on the channel if you want to see it in action. This deck is powerful, but it's very solitary in the sense that you're doing your thing and then you try to combo off. There's very little interaction in the sense of just protecting your combo. You have some Brotherhood's End, but largely you're just doing your thing, and you're going to win. It's an effective deck. It's similar to what we'll get to in Belcher, where your mileage may vary in terms of how much you have enjoyment. There's also a lot of cards here like Dragonstorm being a rare, Bladewing being a rare. There's some cards that just only see play in this kind of shell. Boros Burn, now a deck that I do enjoy playing. So this is a deck that I got to Mythic this month with as well. This is a 61% win rate. It is a Lurrus Companion burn deck. So it's basically mono red, splash white for Lurrus and Lightning Helix. My version, I just played a slightly different. I played Melt Through. We'll pull it up. But the reason I played Melt Through over Play with Fire. So Melt Through keeps the damage basically on that creature. So if you say something with 3 toughness, you can deal 2 damage, and then if you have another spell, you can deal a damage. Or with something like Shieldred, you can leave 2 damage on, and the next turn you untap and you draw 3 damage, you can kill it. It allows you to scale up and be able to leave kind of damage on those creatures. It's also good against things that would normally come back from the graveyard. So anything that has like a disturbed style effect or anything like that, you get to kind of stick damage onto that creature. So I went 27-14. I played a lot on mobile. This is a good mobile deck. You play games really quick with it, but basically the only change through was this Melt Through card that I was mentioning. And then I just switched the mana base to be a 1-3 split between Ramanap Ruins and Battlefield Forge. I got like a good chunk of gameplay if you want to see. This deck wins really quick, like 3.6 minute, but this is an Eidolon of the Great Revel deck, so it lets you just lock your opponent out because they can't cast spells. Best of 1 tends to be a lot lower curves. So something like Elves, they just can't cast spells anymore other than Collected Company. The Reanimator deck takes a lot of ping damage. Izzet Wizards, basically everything that they cast in their deck deals damage to them. You offset that damage with Lightning Helix, plus you can just deal a whole bunch of damage. And then an interesting card, Risk Factor. A lot of times you do this when they're like really low on life. And you're basically just drawing 3 cards. All your cards deal a whole bunch of damage. Playing DRC as an evasive creature also helps filtering your deck to find you more action out of your deck itself. There's then Esper Affinity. So we're going to get to, there's a couple decks in a little that will have some new cards. But like I said, largely first week, it's pretty static with just a couple cards here and there. I wanted to feature this deck because it's got a pretty solid win rate, at least in the Platinum to Diamond rank, 59%. It's an Izzet Affinity list, but this list here, sorry, it's not Izzet, Esper, but it's really Blue-White Affinity. This is completely free to play. No rares, no mythics in it, and it's an artifact aggro deck. And what you're doing is basically using stuff like Ornithopter, Gingerbread as an evasive creature. You have all that glitters that powers your creatures, and Soul Artifact that buffs up your creature. You have Mashiko that buffs up your creature, and then you have like Patchwork that grows bigger, Ingenious Smith that grows bigger, Vault Scourge that's evasive and gains you life. And then you have like artifacts in your mana base of whether it be Razor Tide Bridge or Darksteel Citadel. So If you're interested in getting into like the historic format, this could be a good deck. Like this allows you to kind of pivot in time, build into, I'm going to feature it here, but there's the blue-white artifacts deck and there's the Boros artifacts deck. So we're going to kind of go in different order, but this would be kind of a more souped up version. And the card that really upgrades these artifact decks is Retrofitter Foundry. This allows you to use its last ability, the Sacrifice a Thopter, to create a 4/4. You sack your Ornithopters, you get a boost there. Lets you create artifacts and kind of go to town here. So this is a version very similar. You get an upgrade in Esper Sentinel that draws you cards. Interestingly, this version's got Fervent Champion, which allows you to activate equipment abilities as though they cost 3 less to equip. So your Shadow Sphere or a new card for Sword of Forge and Frontier. So equipped creature gets +2/2, has protection from red and green. If we look, a lot of these decks are burn-based decks, so it gives you protection against all those red burn spells in terms of removal, and gives you unblockable against elves. And then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards, so card advantage, and gets you a little bit extra ramp. But really with this deck, it provides you a card advantage engine. You have Fable the Mirror Breaker to copy things, gets you some more treasure. Ranger Captain of Eos lets you find any of your 1-drop creatures, as well as be insulation against a board wipe. So imagine your opponent, they're at the 4 mana, they're ready to copy off with Dragonstorm. On their upkeep, you sack your Ranger Captain. They can't combo off now. You kind of fog them for the turn, which is nice. This version's also playing another new card in the mana base. This is Mycosynth Gardens. I think this is a card seeing a lot of modern play in Primeval Titan decks as well. So adds a colorless, 1 basically filters your mana, and then X, it becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control. So you can copy a sword, you can copy a Shadow Sphere, you can copy Retrofitter, you can copy the Esper Sentinel, whatever's relevant in terms of progressing your game plan. So then we have Izzet Belcher. This is another kind of all-in combo deck. So very much similar to Dragonstorm. This is a deck that's effective. It will win you games. The gameplay tends to be somewhat repetitive, and you're really just, a lot of it is kind of solitaire. You're playing with yourself, kind of. The core of the deck is you're using Goblin Charbelcher to basically activate its ability. In this case here, every land in your deck is the module Dual Face lands from Zendikar. So Goblin Charbelcher sees no lands in your deck. You flip your entire deck, deal damage to your opponent equal to the number of cards in your deck. The way you kind of cheat this deck is Ironcrag Feat generates 7 mana, which is enough to cast the Charbelcher and activate at the same turn. You can do this as early as turn 3 with the addition of treasures from like Magma Opus or Strike It Rich, or even Seize the Spoils. That's more of a turn 4. You can kind of put things back with the Valakut Awakening, and then Indomitable Creativity lets you sack any of your artifacts. There's no other artifacts in the deck, so it always finds you the Goblin Charbelcher. So again, it's a deck people have asked about. You are committing a lot of kind of mythics to cards that aren't good. Like I wasted 2 mythics when I demoed this deck for Seagate Restoration. But if you want to see it, like, it wins games. And then lastly, for all you connoisseurs, a Dimir Mill deck. And this one's kind of all in mill. So it is using the new Jace, the Perfected Mind. So it can be cast for 3 mana. By playing as Phyrexian mana, you get a little bit lower loyalties to start, but +1 kind of removes an attacker from combat, really, by like fogging 3 points of damage. -2, target player mills 3 cards. Then if a graveyard has 20 more cards, you get to draw 3 cards. If not, you draw 1. And then its X is basically, you can cast it for 4 mana and then mill the person 15. Lots of mill cards here. You have Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Mesmeric Orb that forces people to mill. You have Maddening Cacophony, Glimpse the Unthinkable, mills 10. Founding of the Third Path lets you cast cards from your hand as well as get extra copies in your graveyard. It's a a Rune Crab deck. A bunch of early removal spells, and then like Jawari, Drown in the Lock as a flexible. The one thing I'd say here, you do have some early interaction between the cut downs and the fatal pushes. I would probably just trim these cut downs, to be honest, and then play something like Ritual of Soot, just something as like a sweeper. While yes, it is important to be able to answer their early threats, you're often not going to have the time to like one for one. Having a sweeper is usually pretty effective in that regard. Kind of going from there. This version's also got the Dark Slick Shores as a new fast land. So that's it for the week. Let me know if you've been playing anything in particular in the format. Like I said, majority of these decks, I do have gameplay on my channel. So if you're interested in seeing that, especially like the Boros Burn deck, because it's the most topical, played it like last week to Mythic. Definitely check it out. And as always, if you can, drop a like, comment, and subscribe.